The Detroit Lions just picked up a huge win, knocking off the reigning Super Bowl champs in week one of the 2023 NFL season. So we got to talk about some of the biggest takeaways to come out of this game. Stay tuned. What's going on, Lions fans? Miko here with Pride of Detroit to give you guys a week one recap of the Detroit Lions versus Kansas City Chief game and talk about some of the biggest takeaways that stood out to me in this game. Now, before we get started, let's keep one thing in mind. These are just some of the biggest takeaways that I had coming out of this game. You guys may have some other takeaways that I'm not going to mention, and that's perfectly fine. Be sure to leave those in the comments and we can definitely have a conversation about it. But without further ado, let's get this video started with the number one thing that really stood out to me in this game between the Lions and the Chiefs. And that number one thing being the success that the Lions had with their offensive line and their rushing attack. Now, we all know that when it comes to the Detroit Lions and their offense, it is basically built off the success of this offensive line and their ability to run the ball very well. And I'm not going to lie to you guys. I was a little frustrated in the beginning of this game because the first play that this offense had was a great run play. But then the next couple plays were some passing plays. And there were just a couple situations in the game where I felt like the Lions could have been trying to be more aggressive in the rushing attack, and they just weren't. But when it really mattered and it really got into crunch time, this team got back to what it does best, and that is moving people out of the way and creating rushing lanes. By the end of this game, the Lions had put up 118 rushing yards, with 74 of those coming by way of David Montgomery and the other 42 coming by way of Jahmyr Gibbs. The Lions, again, doing what they do best, moving people out of the way to the point that they were able to pick up 8 first downs off of running the ball alone. And obviously, they were able to also get a rushing touchdown by way of David Montgomery as well. Like I said, this is what this team is built on: an offensive line and a strong rushing attack. And let's not forget, the offensive line is also responsible for pass protection, and they only gave up 1 sack on the night. Jared Goff had all the time in the world to operate in the backfield when it came down to finding his receivers and being able to make smart plays with the football. But we'll get more into that in a little bit later in this video. Now, on to the next thing that really stood out to me in this game, and that has to be the improvements that we saw on the defensive side of the football. Let's not beat around the bush. Going into this year, one of the biggest question marks was going to be on how Aaron Glenn was going to help this defensive unit improve from where it was last year, because we all know where it was. It was at the bottom. And at least showing some signs of improvement, we're going to be a really big test for this group. And if last night was any testament, this group is at least on the right track. It wasn't perfect by any means. There were definitely signs of miscommunication. There were even some lapses in coverage and things of that nature. But for the most part, this defensive unit held up very, very well. When you start looking at the stat sheet, there wasn't a single Kansas City Chief wide receiver to get over 50 yards. There wasn't a running back to get over 30 yards. The Lions basically suffocated the Chiefs' offense and made them very, very one-dimensional, and it made them have to work really hard. This was the game where Patrick Mahomes was going to have to pull out some magic, and the Lions basically kept that to a very, very small sample size. Yes, things got a little dicey in the first half, but again, once the second half rolled around, they got back to doing what they do best, putting pressure on Patrick Mahomes, but also limiting the number of times he was able to run and scramble and pick up additional yards. And let's not forget the turnover they forced, which was a big momentum swinger in this game. But all in all, this defense showed to be much better. It's still a work in progress by all means. They didn't pick up a ton of sacks. They weren't necessarily as sticky as they probably can be in coverage. But for going up against a quarterback of the likes of Patrick Mahomes and being able to hold this Chiefs offense to 5 of 14 on third down is a big accomplishment that this group should very much be proud of. The third thing that really stood out to me from this game has to be the performance of the top 4 rookies that the Lions drafted this year. If you've been watching this channel throughout the offseason, you guys know how high I've been on a number of these rookies that the Lions have drafted, in the likes of Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, and especially Brian Branch. The Brian Branch hype train is just out of control at this point, but we'll get to that in a second. Each of these rookies had their moments to showcase their ability. And while, the likes of Jack Campbell and maybe even Jameer Gibbs weren't getting heavy snap counts, when they were on the field, they made the most of those opportunities. When you start to look at their stat lines, you can definitely see that. Sam Laporta, 5 receptions, 39 yards. Jameer Gibbs, 60 total yards on only 9 touches. Only 9 touches. Things had gotten to the point where I was watching this game begging Ben Johnson to get Jameer Gibbs in the game more because it just seemed like magic happened most of the times when he was touching the ball. Not to mention, he had a touchdown literally at his fingertips. And if it's not for the turf monster, he's probably still celebrating that touchdown right now. But even if that's not the case, you go to the defensive side of the football. And Jack Campbell, again, splitting snaps with the other linebackers, but still making his presence felt when called upon. He only had 2 tackles and 1 PBU, but that pass breakup was very crucial, especially considering what happened next, which leads us into Brian Branch, who, again, found ways to stuff the stat sheet, which is something we talked about all offseason of things that he was doing in training camp. He picked up 2 tackles. He had a PBU. He also had an interception. And let's not forget the cherry on top, that pick six touchdown that helped the Lions tie the game and really lit a fire under this team to make you believe that, you know what, things are back in order and things are back under control in terms of the Lions actually not trailing in that game anymore. Look, it's one game, and even Dan Campbell says he's not going to try and hype up the rookies too much because they're going to still have their bumps and bruises along the way. But for a first showing, those top 4 guys showed that they belong and that there was a reason Brad Holmes considered each of them first round caliber players. Now, the second biggest takeaway that I had to come out of this Chiefs Lions game has to be the performance of Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown. That tandem is just automatic at this point. And again, this was another thing that we talked about throughout training camp as far as, Amon-Ra showcasing his ability to basically be unguardable in the passing game. And in the likes of Jared Goff, just showing that command and comfortability in year 2 with Ben Johnson. And both of those things were on full display. Jared Goff continues his, streak of passes thrown without an interception, reaching now up to 359 passing attempts. Also still being able to put up really respectable numbers in this game, going for 253 passing yards for 1 touchdown and still being able to link up with also Josh Reynolds outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown. And Josh Reynolds came out of this game with only 4 receptions, but led the team in receiving yards with 80. And again, had some very big plays, especially in that fourth quarter to help the Lions kind of solidify the game. But when you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, the broadcaster talked about it themselves. He is just a matchup nightmare. It doesn't matter what you do, whether you decide to go man, whether you decide to go zone, whether you decide to put a slot, a safety, an outside corner on him, he is going to find ways of getting open thanks to his tenacity and just his precise route running. If these 2 guys are able to stay lock and step together and both stay healthy, like Jared Goff said to Ben Johnson in the offseason, Amon-Ra, big year. But at the same time, we might start talking about Jared Goff in a different light if he's able to continue this level of success and comfortability in this offense. Now, last but not least, my biggest takeaway to come out of this Lions Chiefs game has to be the manner in which they won it. Listen, not every game is going to be pretty. And obviously, you heard the likes of what Mike Tirico said about putting an asterisk at the end of this win. Obviously, we all know that's to be garbage. But there's also something to be said for the fact that the Lions didn't play the prettiest game. They didn't play perfectly, but yet they showcased the number one thing that this team and this franchise has been built on since Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes got here. They showcase grit. They showcase the ability to weather the storm and go through the highs and lows of a game and still find ways to win. When Marvin Jones fumbles in the red zone, when Brock Wright and Frank Ragnow have a miscommunication with the snap and there's almost a fumble in that situation. These are plays in the past that would have killed a Detroit Lions team. These are the types of situations that would have deflated a team and led to even more mistakes down the line. But instead, this team held together. Not to mention, even if you look on the defensive side of the football, when Cam Sutton gets that pass interference play, I think all of us, if we were being honest, would agree that we all thought Patrick Mahomes was going to take that penalty and cash that in for 7 points. The fact that this team just found ways to uplift each other and do something that Dan Campbell talks about all the time, which is, listen, play all 3 phases, making sure that you guys can uplift one another in the event that one aspect of the team is lagging behind, which happened at times. The offense didn't run up and down the field scoring, and the defense gave up a couple points here and there too, based on how close this game was. But still, each aspect of this team found ways to uplift the other and be able to keep them in the game. And if you talk about special teams, again, being able to have that fake punt and be able to extend a drive. And if you just look at again how they covered kicks, how they covered punts, this was a complete team win, but again, it wasn't perfect. There were mishaps, there were mistakes, there were lapses in communication or just executing of plays, but yet still when it came down to game winning time, this team galvanized together and still found a way to believe in each other, believe in their head coach, believe in their coordinators, and get the job done. And that's the thing that gives you even more hope, more than anything else that I just covered in this video. And there's a lot of good things, there's a lot of tangible things to look at that this team has done. But when we start talking about again the things that you can't necessarily, see visually or necessarily put your hands on, this team's ability to believe and have that mindset that, you know what, things are different, that we are able to play and hang with anyone, regardless of who's on the field and who's not on the field. That's the thing that's going to take this Lions team very, very far. Like Dan Campbell had also has said, yes, there are things that they're going to have to clean up. They're going to have to get better in certain areas. And that's something I believe that they'll do throughout the course of this season. But when looking at last night and the type of excitement and the type of reassurance that it gives you, but when it comes to this team, I'm very much in the same boat as Dan Campbell. I didn't learn anything new about this team. I just got verification of things that we've already known. So yeah, this team is absolutely built for this. They're built for the success. They're built for the long grind. And why? It's because this team has a strong foundation. And that foundation, whether you like it or not, whether you're sick of hearing it or not, that foundation is grit all the way. So, guys, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comment section below. What are some of the biggest takeaways that you had? Maybe it's a player, maybe it's a scheme, maybe it's something that I didn't mention in this video. Let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you're looking for more coverage on the Detroit Lions, you already know you can head over to the Pride of Detroit website where you can find new articles written daily on the Lions and new information that may be coming out. And last but not least, if you've never subscribed to this channel, but you want to be notified when we upload new videos and just be able to watch new content from Pride of Detroit, be sure to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. That way you can be notified anytime we upload a brand new video to this channel. And once again, guys, like always, I'm Miko here at Pride of Detroit. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.